fiction, science fiction, horror, fantasy, crime, LGBT, thriller.
You have now entered the House of Mystery.
Welcome back into the House of Mystery. I'm Al Warren. Got Mr. John Copenhaver.
Hey, Al. How are you doing today?
I am delicious.
Oh, good.
Yeah, I know.
That's good. It's
better to be delicious without any seasoning.
Yeah.
I was thinking, we were just talking about that, the olden days when I used to call you Copenhagen and...
Yeah, when you mean we got my name wrong?
All the time. Even when I'd write it in front of me, and I even know it, and I should know it, and I do know it. And then,
you're in pretty good company, though. I still, it's just, I think it's a visual memory thing. People see the Copen and they just want to fill in the rest of the word.
Yeah, and I grew up with Copenhagen was the only tobacco you could buy in the 70s. I am that old, believe it or not.
So, yeah.
and that was incredible. So whenever I see Copen, I'm just thinking that, it's kind of crazy. Okay, so we've got someone, we're going to be talking about a book, an anthology. It's by Rock and Hard Place Press, and it's On Fire and Underwater, a climate change crime fiction anthology. Okay, so that's the anthology we're talking about. And we're going to have a couple of writers join us later. And at first we're bringing in the editor. And I think he's got a story as well, but we'll find out here shortly. So joining us is Curtis Ippolito. And thank you for being on.
Thanks, Al. Appreciate it. Hi, John.
Hey, how you doing?
Great.
See, and I got your name right. I think. Close. I wasn't thinking of cigars. So.
Oh, there you go. That's always a good thing.
Yeah, I don't think of cigars when I see Curtis, but we can't.
The strangest compliment I've ever received, but I'll
take it. Well, it's a compliment, Curtis.
Well, no, it is because I could be thinking, and it could be good, and it could be bad. I don't know. Depends on your taste. But anyway, speaking of this, how did you get involved? First of all.
Earlier this year, I have a few friends that are editors at Rock and Hard Place, and one of them came to me and just said, hey, we're thinking about doing a special issue, and the theme's going to be climate change. And just to give some background, the press has done 2 other special issues. They did one on police brutality, and then they did one a couple years ago about the 1% and how depraved they are. And I had a story in that anthology. So when this editor asked me if I wanted to help guest edit, at first I was kind of insecure about it. And I said, well, give me a few days to think about it. Because I was just thinking of those other 2 special anthologies. And the first one, Sean Cosby edited. And I'm like, well, who am I to follow that? And but the more I got thinking about it, the more I realized I was the right person. I have this strong passion for the climate and for the environment, and of course, passion for crime fiction. So I said yes, and just took off from there. And I'm so happy that I made that decision to say yes.
Yeah, always say yes. Never say no. Unless you're being asked by me, right?
Yeah, exactly.
I knew he was going to say that, so
I was like, never say no?
Never say no.
John's wheels were spinning.
I'm trying to embrace no.
Yeah. Well, so when you say that they were going to do this about climate change, so what does that mean? Like, what's the definition here about climate change and crime fiction? How does that work?
Sure. So the basic understanding is that we're already seeing the consequences of climate change. Climate change is nothing new. Climate scientists have been warning us about the dangers to our environment, to our atmosphere, since the 70s, and even before then. And so we are now seeing all these consequences that they were forecasting all those many years ago, before I was even born, playing out. And, last year and early this year were some prime examples, the wildfires in LA and surrounding areas that were out of season and in much higher intensity than a normal wildfire season would be. A couple years ago here in San Diego, where I live, we had a hurricane hit, and that never happens. We're in a protected coastline and it just never happens. And so we still have climate refugees from that hurricane living in motels, living in FEMA trailers to this day. And so the idea was just, we're seeing these things play out in real time and they're all preventable. We could have shored up, our policies and our infrastructure to protect people against these things, and we didn't. We didn't have the political will. We didn't have the care and empathy to think of people who it would affect. And those people who are being affected are everyday people. They're not billionaires. They're not tech moguls. They're not politicians. They're, your waitresses, your nurses, your librarians, your everyday people who can't afford to build a bunker or buy a private island to get away from these things. And so the editors at Rock and a Hard Place and myself really see that as a moral failing, and we wanted to call that out. And I think crime fiction has such a rich history of doing that for social issues and kind of peeling back the curtain and showing people through crime fiction what's wrong with our society, what we should be doing to protect the vulnerable in our communities. So we really thought that this was the perfect time to kind of marry those two causes together and really say our piece. We don't pretend to think that we're going to change people's minds with this anthology. We don't think, a climate denier is going to read these stories and be like, oh, I found the light. But what it does do is it allows us as artists to say our piece, to put our foot down and let generations now and in the future know that some of us did give a damn about this planet and some of us do want to see change happen. And so I think that's very valuable in and of itself.
We're having fires up in Kanakistan too, up in Canada here.
Mm-hmm.
We have them a lot every year now, and it's very warm, much warmer than normal. But, it's happening everywhere now.
Yeah, and that smoke kind of filters into the Northeast and the United States, so it's not just the people that are affected around the wildfires, but it has this cascading effect, as do most climate disasters do.
Yeah, but we pump it in on purpose. That's kind of to get you going, right? Hello, we're on fire. But but that brings me to when you write a book like this, and though you're doing fiction and this crime fiction part of it, being that it's about climate change. Are you worried about cutting off half the audience, or you're worried about controversy or feedback that's negative just because of what you're doing?
No, not necessarily. And I would say that's a real strength of this anthology. If you read it, I think every author did a tremendous job of not getting on a pulpit. There's no browbeating in these stories. We're not shoving this issue down your throat. We're merely setting these characters and these situations in present time and very near future time of how their circumstances could be worsened by these climate issues. So if people are offended, I don't think they'll be offended by the stories. They should be offended by the inaction on climate change at a global level.
Yeah, that's one of the beautiful things about fiction is that it's not an essay or an article. You're not sort of directly trying to convince someone of something. You're just kind of describing lives as they occur. In crime fiction, of course, there's going to be a crime and something is going to occur that's pretty dramatic, but you're not preaching. I think it's one of the beautiful things about doing these anthologies that kind of address social issues in different ways. Curtis, you and I both have edited an anthology recently, and mine was an invitation anthology, which means I just invited writers to contribute along with Salem West, my co-editor. Now yours is a little different, and I would love for you to talk about your process, which honestly, there's a lot more work. and then I would love to hear from, talk a little more about the stories and hear from some of our guest writers too.
Sure. So yeah, we did an open call, and basically what that means, if anyone doesn't know, is we just made it an announcement and said, between this date and this date, we'll be accepting stories, and we, had a web page, and we laid out our idea and the guidelines. And so I think we received, I want to say it was between 60 and 70 stories. And we ended up with 15 in the final anthology. But from the 60 or 70, we whittled those down to the top 30. And then we kept scoring, and the whole editorial board at Rock and a Hard Place, which is 8 or 9 people. It's not a one-man shop, which is great. There's so much talent on that editorial board. It was really great to work with them and have their cooperation and collaboration. But we whittled it down to 15 stories, and that probably is what took the longest, because we received so many fantastic stories. I mean, I think we could have done 3 anthologies with the quality of stories that we received. I was really, really impressed. And so when I say that these 15 stories are of the highest quality, I truly do mean it. They're just fantastic.
Did you see in the submissions, and of course, want to talk about the publication itself, but did you see themes, like particular environmental topics that came up a lot, or some that you were surprised people weren't particularly, jumping in to write about?
I would say wildfire was probably the number one. I think that's just so top of mind, and it's just so like hellish and like apocalyptic looking when you see a wildfire on the news. So that's probably the one theme that we got the most. I would say there probably were themes that I would have liked to see or include, and I'm not going to call those out because I don't want anyone to feel bad, but
why didn't you write about this?
But I think we did reach a pretty well-rounded issue. We have a story about insurance fraud, and we have a story about climate refugees, and we have stories set on all different continents. So they're really varied, and so I was very happy with that.
Let's hear from some of our guest writers.
Yeah.
Curtis, do you want to introduce them?
Sure. So we have Kendall Brunson, and Kendall is the author of Bad Egg. Hi, Kendall.
Hey, thanks for letting me join you guys. Excited to be here.
And then we have Caitlin McKenna, and she is the author of The Long Night of the Polar Bear.
Yep.
Did I get it?
Great title.
Great title. I don't know why I blanked.
Thanks. It's super memorable.
Caitlin lives in the Denver area, and Kendall lives in Florida.
Let's talk about each of these stories. So, Kendall, talk about your story. What story did you put in, and where did it come from?
So I set my story in the Everglades. I'm from Florida. I'm a 4th generation Floridian. And in the time that I've been here, in the past almost 40 years, I've seen such a huge change in the wildlife. The Florida that I was raised with is completely gone. The Florida that my grandparents and great-grandparents had was disappearing by the time I came around. And what we have left is very, very minimal. In fact, I want to say it's almost 1,000 acres of Florida is developed daily. It's a shocking number. It's a shocking number. And so I was really inspired to look at the impacts of that in the Everglades. And I also am fascinated by people who, on Instagram, who hunt wildlife in the Everglades. And they are python hunters and really looking at hunting those invasive species. And I wanted to look for a way to marry my love of crime with my fascination of people who are doing this really important work in the Everglades of hunting down these pythons. In fact, Florida has an annual competition for people to catch people who can catch the most number of pythons every year. It's held in August because pythons, I don't think people realize, are really destroying every part of the ecosystem here, especially in South Florida, because they eat the K deer, they eat alligators, they're taking down the predators, and it impacts the full food chain. So I really wanted to take a look at how climate change is not only impacting humans, but how humans are impacting other species.
What's the highest number of pythons, or the most, I should say, number of pythons caught? Do you know?
So this year, for the first time, a woman won the python hunting competition.
Cool.
Which is very cool. And I think she caught just over 60 pythons.
Wow.
In 1 to 2 weeks.
Wow. Oh my goodness, that's making my skin crawl.
Another thing that I loved in Kendall's story is she has this little subplot about turtles and poaching turtles, which I am a collector and a breeder of some turtles. And so I know about the poaching of turtles. It's huge. A lot of our the United States has dozens of native species of turtles, and a lot of them are poached and sent over to Asia for either pets or for food and for medicine. So I was kind of excited to see that little subplot in Kendall's story.
How do you intertwine that? How do you make it so that it's not so obvious? Like, because I know Curtis was saying earlier that you're not browbeating people. You're not just, it's not like that, but you put it in the story somehow. Like, do you create a character that sort of works around it or is a part of that?
So my protagonist in the story, she is participating in this annual Python competition. She gives tours of the Everglades in the swamp as part of her day job. And then she does this for fun. And because she is passionate about the environment, I think in many ways she mirrors me in looking around the environment she was raised in and seeing it quickly disappearing. So she's passionate about what she's doing, but the other people around her aren't necessarily as passionate as she is. And so it's really her discovering how the people in her life who she thinks are one thing are actually doing something else completely.
Do you find it hard to get into the character that is like being bad to this, nature and the world and that sort of thing? Because you kind of have to get into that character in order to write them. Does that bother you in some way, or what do you have to do to get that going in your writing?
I have a pretty strong nihilism streak that I have to keep down.
Now we're getting to it.
I just tapped into that and let it run wild.
Animal. What about you, Curtis? How about you? How do you handle that?
Yeah, I think there are so many examples of horrible people out there, and all you have to really do is pick up a newspaper or click a article on the internet or watch some TV, and like you can pretty much just take their dialogue verbatim. A lot of times, I did that with one story that I wrote a while back. Is there was this trucker they did a story in the Union Tribune here about how trucking was being impacted by the pandemic, and he was just like, that goddamn pandemic didn't slow me down, that fake virus, like, I just kept trucking, and I was like, just taking notes, like, I'm going to use that dialogue and that dialogue, so I think there's enough horrible people out there, they set the example for you. You don't have to do much work.
Just turn on the news.
Yeah, I know.
So let's bring in the other writer you brought with us. That's Caitlin, right? Caitlin McKenna.
Yeah.
So Caitlin, let's talk about your story. What was your story that you contributed?
Yeah, so my story is called Long Night of the Polar Bear, and it follows a Norwegian assassin on Svalbard, which is an archipelago above Norway. And he has been exiled there and is attempting to get himself off the island by blackmailing his employer. So we follow him around Svalbard, and then climate change sort of rips his plans away from him.
He sounds like a nice guy.
Yeah.
Caitlin's story is one of those where, in some ways, climate change is the villain, or one of the villains.
Yeah.
I found that very fascinating.
Yeah, that is interesting.
That's clever. That's great.
So I don't want you to spoil the story, but I'm
give us
curious
the end.
sort of-
Come on.
I'm curious what kinds of climate change, ultimately start making, throwing up obstacles for your hero.
Yeah, so Svalbard is a really interesting place for me. It's this type of setting that when you go there, and I've only been there once, it makes this huge impression. And it has also been a part of my understanding of climate change through most of my life because I received a postcard from there when I was 14 from my grandfather, who at that point had just become the first scientist to see that the North Pole was not covered in ice. So that was in August of 2000. And so I have been drawn to Svalbard and the ideas of, surrounding the issues that it's going through because it is one of the places that is warming the fastest on the planet. When the permafrost, which everybody who lives there is very invested in keeping the permafrost frozen to the point that the buildings on the island, in their foundations, they're actually cooled so that the warmth of the house doesn't melt the permafrost underneath. And despite all of that, the permafrost is melting, and that is causing landslides. It's causing, a huge change to the way of life of not just the people on the archipelago, but also the animals. So polar bears are a big part of the story of Long Night of the Polar Bear. Part of what I wanted to touch on was that the polar bears' lifestyles are changing. If they can't get onto the sea ice in order to hunt, because the sea ice doesn't exist anymore, then they're going to have to hunt on land. So I would say that polar bears become a character in the story for sure, but also the issue that I was looking at was the permafrost melting and landslides that come out of that.
That's fascinating. I think it's really a clever way of talking about climate change through storytelling. And I'm sort of picking up on a trend here is that is simply by having characters, attempting to respond to their environment. You're saying something about climate change, right? It's like I'm also a teacher. I'm always thinking about students and thinking about obstacles and encouraging students to put more obstacles in front of their characters because it makes for more interesting reading. Anyway, all that sort of stirred up, and when you're talking about your story, I think that's great.
Yeah, he definitely deals with a lot of obstacles.
Yeah. Curtis, so I'm curious sort of if you could give us a little more of a sense of your process. Now you have these terrific stories and you've gone through them and made selections. How did you arrange them and think about what you wanted to say as an editor? Because it's kind of a different, and I know you're an accomplished writer, but I know from putting your editor mind on, it's a little different. I'd love for you to talk a little more about that and sort of where you saw Kendall and Caitlin's story in this process. And
So you're right. Like, this is the first time I've been an editor, and so wearing that hat is definitely different than just plugging away as a writer. And seeing the other side of the process was just so enlightening. There's all these little things that you take for granted as a writer that just get done, or you think they just get done, but actually the editor or editors are doing those things. As far as how I structured the anthology, I did put a lot of care into that. We have 8 male writers, 6 women writers, and I first looked at that. I didn't want 4 male stories stacked together. So I wanted that to be varied. But the number one thing was just hinting back to what you had mentioned earlier is the theme and the types of climate change in each story. So I didn't want to have wildfire, avalanche. So
right.
I wanted to vary those up. So that was another consideration. And then the third consideration was just kind of the rhythm or the music of the anthology. We have the last story by Megan Lucas is our longest story. I think it's somewhere around 9,000 or 10,000 words, and no other story comes even close to half that length. So we knew, not only because of its length, but because it is a gut punch, that we wanted to end on that story. So it was kind of building backwards from there in a way. And I knew with that story being so emotional, I wanted to put a story before it that would kind of, offset that, or kind of have the reader be unbalanced going into Megan's story. So I put Richie's story there, and his is a very cleverly structured story that's kind of taken from interviews after this COP climate show failed, and it was kind of the dissection of that. And so it's a great story, but it just leaves the reader off balance heading into Megan's story. And so I try to do little things like that. With Kendall's story and with Caitlin's story, they were just so strong and both so unique. Kendall's is set in the Everglades. I have another story like that. Caitlin's was set, in this far-reaching area that, no other story was set similar to it. So those two stories were just great, squeezing in between other stories like a wildfire story, or something of a nature that we're more used to seeing. So really, it was just a really fun experiment. And then I don't know if Caitlin's picked up on this, but I also wanted to put Caitlin's story next to Jim Rulin's story because she's a big fan of Jim and a couple of the music books that he's written. So I just look for little things like that to make my authors happy.
That was very sweet of you. Jim and I can be neighbors now.
That's right.
So, Curtis, who were the bad writers? Who are the ones you turned down? What's their name?
They're not in this anthology.
I know, but tell us who you turned down so we can call them right now, and we'll get them in the show and have some fun.
Well, I know. I'm sorry, Curtis, I'm answering for you. So often it's like there's just too many. It's a really an embarrassment of riches. There's so many good things out there that it's like figuring out what of the good ones to take, and that kind of thing can be part of the challenge. I mean, did you find that to be the case?
Yeah, absolutely. I think I mentioned earlier, I really do believe we could have had 2 or 3 anthologies from the amount of great stories we got. It was an embarrassment of riches, and I don't know if there was even 1 or 2 stories where I'm just like, oh, this is horrible. There were a couple that just missed the mark, but I don't think they were bad stories. They just, didn't fit the, story we were trying to tell.
Right. Well, there's always the office, I set my story in the environment, so.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
It's not quite the idea.
I mentioned the sun, and it was raining that day.
Right, exactly. It's an environmental
It should
story.
fit.
Well, okay, I'm going to get some dirt somewhere. So, Kendall, Caitlin, so what's it like having Curtis as an editor? Was he good? Was he real mean? Was he really mean and tough?
He was a great editor, I thought. And actually, the entire team at Rock and a Hard Place was just awesome to work with. I had been published in, other places before, and usually they'll just give you one editor to work with, but we actually got notes back from the whole team. In some places, on my story at least, they were actually having conversations with one another about what they thought would be best for the piece, and I think that it was a really smooth process, but it also made my story at least way better. I had some things that I hadn't really connected into the main theme, and they pointed that out to me, and I'm so much more happy with the final product, having worked with them.
I had a very similar experience, and by the end of it, I thought it made my story so much stronger, and I'm really happy with what was published because, like Caitlin said, it was the whole team, and I've never experienced really seeing that conversation outside of a workshop written for me to review and really think about and be able to thread that through and take their notes like that. It was a great experience.
Kendall and I have a similar background in that we're going to the same MFA program. Well, Kendall has already graduated from that MFA program. So we've had a lot of good workshops where we were, told to take feedback well.
It's a lesson of going through an MFA program is you do learn to receive the feedback and sort through it. You don't take all the feedback.
I think that aspect was really beneficial to me too. I know, John, when you talked about your process with Crime Inc. Iconic, you did the bulk of the edits, and the team at Rock and a Hard Place did the bulk of the edits for me. And then I signed off, and I was like the last reviewer. And there were so many times where I was like, I don't have anything to add to this. You all just killed it.
Thumbs up.
Thumbs up. Absolutely. I'm
Great
just going to
job.
forward this on to the writer. So that was a huge burden lifted off my shoulders. And honestly, that was perfect because, Rock and a Hard Place, they do that, 4 times a year with their regular issues. So they are a well-oiled machine. They know how to operate. And so for me just to be able to kind of manage that process and be more of like a project manager, I think was beneficial for me and great for the writers to be able to have that, those experienced editors weigh in, and then for me to just come in at the end and just kind of be the facilitator.
So you rode the wave.
That's right. Yeah. That part I did. Yeah.
Well, okay. So now the book is out now. People can buy it everywhere, right? Amazon and all this stuff like that. So each of you, let's give out your contact information and where people can find you. If you have a website, social media, other books out stuff. So let's start with Curtis.
Sure. So I'm on Blue Sky and Instagram. Blue Sky, I think it's just my first and last name. And then Instagram is Curtis_SD for San Diego. And I'm working on a novel right now, but I don't have anything forthcoming anytime soon.
Well, fantastic. And what about you, Kendall?
You can find me on Instagram and Threads, spending far too much time. And I'm at Kendall Brunson, all one word. And I also have a Blue Sky account that I need to spend more time on because I like it much better over there. It's a really nice place. I have another anthology that I'm going to be in, but I don't think I can mention anything yet.
You could tell us, but you'd have to kill us.
For at least another month. And then I have another novel that I'm working on, and unpublished yet.
Well, fantastic. And Caitlin, what about you?
So I am online at cemckenna.com, and on Blue Sky at ce-mckenna.bsky.social. It's always weird with Blue Sky because you end up having to spell the whole thing out. So
Right.
Yeah, you're like a subdomain of Blue Sky. And I have an essay that came out today in Hippocampus, actually, which is not climate change related well, it kind of is. It's AI related, which is going to be related to climate change. So
that's right. Yeah, unfortunately.
And then if there are any agents listening to this, I'm querying my first novel.
Oh, wait, we can do that?
I was about to say I'm waiting to hear back from some, so.
Yeah.
Awesome.
Fingers crossed for all of you.
With you.
But yeah, if anybody wants to publish a novel about the murder of Jane Stanford, hit me up.
Hey, Al, before we go, do you mind if I just run down the table of contents and give everyone a shout out?
No, go ahead.
Okay, so this is the entire list that we have in On Fire and Underwater. C.W. Blackwell, Mary Thorson, Zachariah Johnson, Pooja Guha, Colin Brightwell, Priscilla Patton, Christian Anchetta, Raymond Brash, Edward Barnfield, Kendall Brunson, Michael Downing, C.E. McKenna, Jim Ruland, Richie Navarez, and Megan Lucas. And I just want to say thank you to each and every one of you. You made this anthology the best that it could possibly be, and I hope everyone picks up a copy and reads these writers' excellent stories.
Let's talk about the book. It's called On Fire and Underwater, Climate Change Crime Fiction Anthology by Rock and Hard Place Press. So Curtis Ippolito, Kendall Brunson, and Caitlin McKenna. Thank you all for being here.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, guys.
This has been a production of the House of Mystery Radio Show. To find out more about our show, guests, or hosts, go to our website at houseofmysteryradio.com.